Greetings to Dr. Sam and my fellow classmates. Today, our group will be presenting about one of our critique articles, namely Decision-Making, Cognitive Distortions, and Alcohol Use in Adolescent Problem and Non-Problem Gamblers, an experimental study. So, I will start off with the abstract in this article. Based on this article, the abstract is an unstructured abstract as it was not arranged according to its respective sections, such as introduction, methods, results, and discussion. As for the introduction in this article, the first problem statement is that the Iowa gambling task improves with age. The second problem statement is that a large body of research has supported the role of cognitive distortions in gambling, demonstrating that over 70% of gambling-related cognitions externalized during gambling sessions are irrational. The third problem statement is that cognitive distortions have been found to be a strong predictor of youth gambling problems. The fourth problem statement is that problem gambling has been associated with multiple psychiatric conditions, including substance and alcohol abuse. The fifth problem statement is that alcohol gambling is typically associated with several risk-taking behaviors, including substance and alcohol abuse. So, the gap this article is trying to fill is that whether poor decision-making is associated with severity of gambling problems in adolescent gamblers, as has been found among adult gamblers. Besides, there are actually three aims for this study. The first aim was to determine if adolescent decision-making is affected by level of gambling involvement. The second aim was to determine cognitive distortions and alcohol use in the presence and in the absence of gambling problems. Finally, the third aim was to determine the pattern of associations between gambling severity, decision-making, cognitive distortions, and alcohol use, and to identify the best predictors of problem gambling.
The participant in this study was selected among male adolescents aged 16 to 19 years old who are still attending secondary school in the province of Naples. A total of 104 male adolescents were randomly selected based on the South Oaks Gambling Screen Revised for Adolescent Scores, also known as SOGS-RA. However, there were no female participants in this study because researchers found that females start gambling later than male. Therefore, only male adolescents participate in this study. The sample of non-problem gamblers consists of adolescents with SOGS-RA scores of 0 or 1, whereas the sample of problem gamblers consists of adolescents with SOGS-RA score above 4. Thank you.
A total of 4 instruments are used in the study. The first instrument used is Iowa Gambling Task IGT, a psychological task to evaluate decision-making through simulated card game. Participants were given 2,000 loan of play money and they will choose a total of 100 cards from the 4 decks of cards. Decks A and B are considered as disadvantageous choice, while decks C and D are advantageous choice. The performance on IGT is computed by subtracting the number of disadvantageous choices from the advantageous choices. Then, a global score below 10 is indicative of a decision-making deficit. IGT had low to moderate reliability, which R value range from 0.35 to 0.65. Next, South Oaks Gambling Screen Revised for Adolescents. SORAS. It consisted of 16 items with closed-ended question, yes or no, related to the gambling behaviors. A score between 0 and 1 denotes non-problem gambling, 2 and 3 denotes at-risk gambling, and score above 4 denotes problem gambling. Combined alpha for SORAS is 0.76. Besides, Gambling-Related Cognition Scale, GRCS, also used in these studies. It comprises 23 items with 7-point Likert scale answer that assess 5 dimensions of gambling-related irrational beliefs, which are gambling-related expectancy, illusion of control, predictive control, inability to stop, and interpretative bias. The higher the score indicates higher level of irrational belief. The combat alpha for overall skill is 0.9, while combat alpha for gambling-related expectancy is 0.68, illusion of control 0.57, predictive control 0.69, inability to stop 0.84, and interpretative bias is 0.82. The last instrument used was alcohol use disorder identification test audit. It is a 10-item self-report screening measures comprising 3 major domains. 3 questions on the frequency of drinking, 3 questions concerning alcohol dependence, and 4 questions on problem caused by drinking. A 4-point Likert scale answer was used. A cutoff point of 8 indicates a strong likelihood of harmful alcohol consumption. Combat alpha for audit is 0.84.
Next, I will explain about the procedures for this study. First of all, the researcher requested the head of the school to fill in an informed consent which was prepared by them by sending it to the school in letter form. The letter has clarified the research objectives and the tools that will be used for the research study. The informed consent form was collected after the head of the school had completed filling up the form. After getting the approval from the head of the school, the researcher has chosen the participants who fulfill the criteria. After that, they requested the participants to complete the informed consent form and collected them after they had completed filling it. The researchers also requested the parents of the participants who are under the age of 18 years old to fill in the informed consent form. Next, the researchers had explained the rules and processes of the experiment to the participants. The researchers explained the details to the participants so that they can understand the way this experiment will be conducted and their own position when participating in this experiment.
The next step will be data collection, whereby it was conducted into 2 phases. During the first phase, participants were required to complete a battery of paper and pencil questionnaires within 30 minutes. During the second phase, participants were required to perform the computerized experimental task individually in a school classroom. The final step, debriefing the participants. The psychological health of the participants after the experiment was concerned, and any misconceptions from the participants towards research study was corrected during the debriefing sessions.
The analysis was carried out using the SPS version 20.0. A univariate ANOVA test was carried out with alcohol use total score audit as the dependent variable and 2 groups which are non-problem gamblers and problem gamblers as the independent variable to verify if the measure differed between groups. A mixed analysis of covariance and COVA was carried out with the non-problem gamblers and problem gamblers as the between participants factor, IGT stages as the within factor, and audit score as the covariate to assess the decision-making ability between groups and to conclude whether this ability was independent of alcohol use.
Besides that, to verify whether the measures are differed significantly between group and independently from alcohol use, a unvariate and COVA with cognitive distortion total score (DRCS) act as the dependent variable. The 2 groups, which are non-problem gamblers and problem gamblers, as the independent variable, and audit score as covariate was performed in this study. Moreover, another measure taken was a multivariate analysis of covariance (COVA) test on the subscales of GRCS with non-problem gamblers and problem gamblers, acting as the independent factor, and audit score as covariate. Besides, zero-order correlation were performed to test association among measures. A logistic regression analysis with non-problem gamblers and problem gamblers as independent variable, and IGT, GRCS, and audit total as dependent variable was conducted in this study to examine the predictive value of measure on severity of gambling problems.
As for the ethical approval of this study, all of the procedures conducted and participants that involved were in accordance with the ethical standards of the Institutional and National Research Committee with the 1964 Helsinki Declaration. Moreover, this research ethical approval number was not included in this article.
As for the results from this article, the problem gamblers group show a higher degree total of problematic drinking compared to the non-problem gamblers, as non-problem gamblers show higher performance when carrying out tasks compared to the problem gamblers. However, problem gamblers also experience higher results of irrational beliefs, cognitive distortions, poor decision making, and also problematic alcohol consumption, which affects the audit score significantly. So, throughout the regression model, it is found that the variance of the criterion, which is 33%, show 78.8% accuracy, overall accuracy of all the disorders experienced by the problem gamblers.
Now I'm going to talk about the discussion of this study. The adolescents' decision-making, cognitive distortion, and alcohol assumption will study whether or not they are engaged with gambling problems. It is shown that adolescents who have trouble in making decisions, abusing alcohol, and had illogical gambling beliefs are associated with gambling issue. By using Iowa Gambling Task, IGT, and Gambling-Related Cognitive Skills, GRCS, it is found that the effect of poor decision-making can be caused by specific cognitive distortion. The approach of using IGT and GRCS is reliable and valid as how the results from the previous studies were consistent, and therefore it has been concluded the inability to learn from previous mistakes can lead to poor decision making and difficulties in making choices using emotional process. The key information like social approval that encourages youth gambling is the crucial part of changing the mindset of adolescents. A negative correlation between problem gambling and IGT scores was also found that it represents the increment of the gambling seriousness will worsen one's decision-making process. Contrastingly, it was studied that there is a positive relationship between alcohol abuse and problem gamblers along with the addiction of comorbidity. This proves that there is no difference between adolescents and adults regarding their psychological and behavioral patterns towards a gambling outcome.
There are a few strengths in this study. The first strength of the study is the insights that were brought upon to parents about the negative effects of gambling activities have on the decision-making ability of their adolescents. The second strength is the experimental and self-report methodology used in this study, as it promotes high validity since its results can be easily duplicated by future researchers. The third strength is the study being one of the few research which focuses on the role of cognitive distortions in the adolescents' problem gamblers, as it is an important factor in the onset and development of problem gambling behavior, while other researchers mostly focus on adult problem gamblers only. In terms of limitations, firstly is the relatively low internal reliability of the GRCS of the present study. The second limitation of this study is the cross-sectional nature and also the weaknesses that are inherent in both experimental and self-report methodologies. The third limitation is gender bias, where the results cannot be generalized to all adolescents, as it only recruited male adolescents to participate in the study. Lastly, the sample size is also one of the limitations, where there were only 104 participants in this study, and it is too small to represent the population.